Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Well and Worthy Life. I'm so excited to bring a new guest on, a new friend on. And you guys know I love making new friends. And so when I ran across Karen, I was like, oh my gosh, she's one of those that I would be best friends with. We have so much in common. So Karen Viesta is a certified health and lifestyle coach who works with women in their 40s and 50s who want to transform their bodies and their lives. She is the founder of Wellegant Women Coaching and host of the Well Egant Women Podcast. Let me tell you, you need to go listen to so many of her episodes are so good. Just binge listen. They're so good. After going through her own midlife reinvention, Karen helps women in midlife to age powerfully, create extraordinary health and vitality, and make each new decade even better than the last. And I love this. I mean, you and I are so much in line with each other, Karen. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
You know, I love connecting with women on Instagram, and that's how we connected at first. And it just, there are more and more of us in this space helping women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond to feel better. And it's funny because we have gone through our own journey through this process, our own reinvention through this process, and I love that. I love what you're doing. You're so inspiring. And like I said, I binge listened to so many of your episodes and I learned so much from so many people. And I love finding a new podcast that your podcasts are so consumable and they're not too long. You know how some podcasts, you have to break them up into sections, they'll listen to them, and yours are just the perfect length. So thank you for that.
I'm so glad. Thank you. And I agree. I think one of the real perks of going on this podcasting journey is just the amazing people I've met, the amazing people I've connected with in this space. And I'm just constantly, learning from them and being inspired by them. So you are certainly one of those people for me as well.
It is so fun because, I don't think we ever quit learning. It's just like I tell my clients on this journey through this stage of life, it is a journey. Like, I don't think we ever just arrive and get there and like go, oh, everything's great in my life. Right. There's never a time like that, right? Or there may be a moment. It's kind of like that thing they say about you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. So there's, I have 3 boys, and it was always like it was very few times that I felt good about all 3 of them.
Right.
But it is.
But it's funny to your point. I think that's why so many women feel so stuck and so frustrated, is that I think there is an expectation that, we should figure out this midlife thing and just once and for all be done with it. And I think that, having the mindset that you just spoke of, the mindset of, it's a journey, and we're going to go through waves, and sometimes it's going to be amazing and we're riding the wave, and other times it's going to take us down. But knowing that we have the ability to learn, and we have support in a community, and we have resources, and we have resilience, I think that takes all the pressure off, right? It helps us to take all of our power back, really, because I think the thing that's most disconcerting about midlife is the feeling that we're powerless. And I think the minute that we reframe it as an opportunity to learn and grow, and really the ability to design a pretty extraordinary second half of life, if we're committed to that, then I think it really makes us feel so much more powerful. I'm not a fan of the term aging gracefully. I don't know how you feel about it, but to me,
I used to use that term a lot, but I don't use that term so much anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I feel like it has, to me, like a certain resignation, like, I can't really do anything about it, so I might as well just accept it and do it gracefully. And I feel like, I love the term aging powerfully, because that implies to me, like, I'm in the driver's seat. And there's so much that I can control, and I can really design an incredible second half of life, and I can feel very powerful doing it. So I think that little, shift, that little bit of a reframe really takes, for me, it took a lot of the frustration and the overwhelm out of the midlife experience. And it enabled me to see it as more of an opportunity and more of an exciting time, because it's kind of like the bridge to the second half of my life. And I can view that in a way that makes that feel very exciting to me.
Right. And I love that, because I do think it is this thing where that we are powerful, that we do have choices, that there are choices that we can make, how we nourish our bodies. There is a choice that we make. I know that you've pretty much given up alcohol. I've pretty much given up alcohol just because it doesn't serve us well,
Yeah.
And it's not anything that we had issues with. It was just that we learned, and that's just a choice we make. And everybody gets to make any kind of choices they want to. But if you want to age powerfully, I love that. If you want to age powerfully, then you have to make certain choices that are going to get you in that direction.
Yeah. And I think, we're always, as you said, at a choice point. And again, the minute we think about things that way, it really helps us to take our power back. And I think one of the beautiful things about all of the physical challenges that happen in midlife, it's easy to sort of look at them and say, midlife is terrible, and I feel terrible, and I'm gaining weight, and I'm not sleeping. One of the beautiful things about that is that it forces us to really prioritize how we feel, in a way that, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, if you're not sleeping well, you kind of have the energy reserves and the ability to compensate for that. But when you hit a certain age, it gets really a lot harder to compensate for, that glass of wine that disrupts your sleep, or, the days that you're missing your workout, right? It's your body is much more sensitive to things. So I think, while it can be frustrating when you're trying to figure things out and you're not quite there yet, I think it really does force us to prioritize how we feel, and then allow that to drive a lot of the choices we make. I mean, you and I both find alcohol very disruptive to our sleep. And
Right.
I'm assuming you're like me. I love the way I feel on a full night's sleep. So that glass of wine, just most of the time, it isn't worth it to me. And yeah, there are times that I say, I'd really love a glass of wine with this meal, or, I was recently on vacation, and when I was away, I enjoyed the wines of that region. So yes, it's not a, this really restrict, it's not this strict restriction, but it is more a choice, because I just really value sleep, and I know how much better I feel when I've slept. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's all about, just choices.
So let me ask you this about the alcohol. So you were in Italy, and did you notice the alcohol affecting your sleep when you did drink the wine?
My sleep generally when I'm away is so disrupted anyway, because of the jet lag and I couldn't really tell you. I think I probably slept better on this trip than I usually do, because I was taking NyQuil. I had a head cold going in. So I think I was taking cold medicine at night. So it was a little bit hard to tell.
Right.
But yes, I mean, normally even one drink, I will find myself, I don't have trouble falling asleep, but I'll find myself waking up in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Well, so this past weekend, I was at a wedding, and I had one drink. I had a vodka tonic, and just that one little vodka tonic interrupted my sleep. But when I was in France and Italy in May, and I was there for about 21 days. So I was there for good amount of time. So I got adjusted very well. And I drank some wine while I was there. And I'm telling you, it did not affect my sleep, because it's not all the preservatives and all the stuff that we have in the wine here.
Yeah.
So I will say that it was amazing. I still didn't drink much because I just didn't want to go down that road. It just, it's kind of like, I kind of play it forward, like, well, it's gonna, I also don't like to drink my calories. I like to, so that was one of the things, but more than anything, it's the sleep, to be perfectly honest. And so having a glass of wine did not affect me over there like it does here.
I've never drank organic wines, but I do hear that the organic wines don't have quite the same effect, and they're not quite as disruptive. So it could very well be that, whether it's the pesticides or whatever it is that we're taking in with the wine, maybe that's what it is. But like you, I'm most of the time I just don't chance it. I just would rather err on the side of being cautious.
Right. Well, I worked too hard on that sleep. And to me, that was one of my big signs of perimenopause, was that not sleep. Hey there, beautiful souls. It's Deanna, and I've got something incredibly special to share with you. Are you in the midst of a whirlwind that is peri or postmenopause? Feeling a bit lost, struggling with those stubborn symptoms and the unwelcome guest we call belly fat? I totally get it. I've been there too. But guess what? There's a bright light waiting for you, a transformative journey where you're not alone. It's called the Revive Now membership. And it's more than just a program. It's your sanctuary, your guide to embrace this new chapter with open arms. Picture this: a community of incredible women just like you, supporting, uplifting, and empowering each other. We talk nutrition, fitness, and yes, that pesky belly fat too. We dive deep into self-love, body positivity, and finding your inner strength. I created this space because I understand the struggles, the late night worries, and the desire for change. I want you to experience life with vitality and confidence, and with a community that understands your journey intimately. So here's your invitation. Click the link in the show notes to visit our Revive Now membership page. Dive into the details, feel the warmth of our community, and imagine a life where you're not just surviving menopause, but thriving in it. Let's make this chapter the most vibrant and empowering one yet. Come, join me. Let's revive your spirit, your health, and your joy. Click the link and let's start this beautiful journey together. See you inside. So let's go back to your journey in perimenopause. And first of all, did you even think perimenopause when you started having symptoms? Like, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. So, I was certified as a health coach back in 2012. So 2017 rolls around. I'm 48 years old, and I ended that year a 24-year marriage. So when I started having symptoms, I was really, I had anxiety, I wasn't sleeping. All of those things could have very easily been attributed to just my, emotional turmoil. It was a really traumatic experience, as anybody who's gone through a divorce knows, especially after a long marriage like that. So my first knee-jerk reaction, was not, oh, I'm in perimenopause. I really was thinking it was emotional. And so, I did what everybody does in those situations. I went and saw a therapist, and I, went to my doctor. And I have to tell you, I didn't hear a lot of encouraging messages. I heard a lot of the same thing over and over. Doctors would say, well, you're over 40 and this is just kind of what happens and it'll pass. Or they would say, well, this is just perimenopause. It happens to everybody. On the flip side of it, I was trying to deal with the emotional stuff, but to be honest, I felt terrible all the time. I was exhausted because I wasn't sleeping. I was stressed. So I just felt like it was a perfect storm and I was a perfect mess.
Mhm.
And but I just wasn't willing to resign myself to feeling terrible. Like in my mind, I think maybe it's just my stubbornness, but like there was a
Love
part
that.
of me that was just like, no, I'm not buying that, and I'm going to figure this out.
Mhm.
And it was especially frustrating for me because I had my nutrition training and I was exercising and I was doing everything quote unquote right. I thought I was doing
Yeah.
everything that was best supporting my body. The problem was I really didn't know that your over 40 body is different from your under 40 body, and you have to support it differently.
Mhm.
So I just made it my mission. I said, if I can't find the expert that I need, then I'm going to become that expert. And I took some advanced certifications in women's wellness, and I, changed doctors. I was speaking to experts in the field. I really just learned everything I could about perimenopause and postmenopause and kind of, how to care for your over 40 body.
Mhm.
And within a period of, it wasn't very long. I would say it was probably a period of about 8 to 10 months.
Mhm.
Every area of my life changed. I mean, I was different physically, I was different emotionally. I just felt like everything came into balance. So much so that other people started asking me, what supplements are you taking and what are you doing? And
Mhm.
and I kind of realized at that point, like, wow, this is really um a mystery for most women. And so that was when I kind of began to devote my coaching practice exclusively to women over 40. And that's when I, developed my website and my podcast and my programs and stuff. And so, that's really what drove it. And I think so many times, right, we're teaching what's the expression? You teach what you most need to
Yeah.
learn.
Oh,
I think,
exactly.
that's what happens, right? We go through our own struggles, we kind of figure it out, and then we can become a hopeful voice for other women who are struggling.
I love that. I love that hopeful voice. Okay, so I mean, I know that there were probably a few changes, maybe a lot of changes that you made, but what were some of the changes that you made that you felt like made the most difference?
Mhm. Well, it's funny because we touched on one of them, which is just reframing aging.
Mm.
I think one of the benefits, as traumatic as divorce is, for me, one of the benefits of it was that I kind of realized that it was up to me to create my life, right? There was nobody else that I could either lean on to create it or blame when it wasn't what I wanted it to be. Like, it kind of forced me to just take 100% responsibility for my life.
Mm.
And that meant taking 100% responsibility for my health, because I realized that I was never really going to feel great emotionally if I was operating from this place of being physically depleted. So I think first there was just that taking full responsibility for my life and my choices and my future. And once I did that, I changed to an anti-inflammatory diet. I call it my midlife glow up. In fact, I
Oh, I
have
love that.
I have a free resource which I'm happy to share with your
Yes.
listeners, called the Midlife Glow Up Guide. And I
Mhm.
kind of outline in that guide a lot of the steps that I took, because nothing I did was a big sweeping change. I'm not really a fan of the overhaul. I think especially
Mhm.
when you're going through a traumatic situation, or when you're, at a place in your life where you're feeling really terrible, the last thing we need is to burden ourselves with a complete overhaul of nutrition and exercise. And, I need to wake up and meditate for a half an hour every day. And I need to do a cold plunge. And, it can so easily overwhelm us. So
Mhm.
I think for me, what was important was small, manageable changes that I did consistently over time.
Mhm.
And, little by little, I just started feeling better. And little by little, I started sleeping more. And I started, the anxiety started to dissipate. I think, for one of the things I never realized about perimenopause is that anxiety is a huge symptom that many women struggle with. I was really attributing that to all the emotional stuff. I didn't realize there was a hormonal component of that. So once I adopted a more anti-inflammatory diet, and once I started doing things like eliminating alcohol and really prioritizing my sleep, it was really these little small changes that just, I was just super consistent about it. And, let's face it, it's easy to be consistent. People will always try to rely on discipline. And while I think discipline's a beautiful thing,
Right.
it doesn't take you far. What for me helped me to stick with these healthy practices was the fact that I was starting to feel better and better. And that was very motivating to me. I knew like, oh, this is working and I'm feeling good. So yeah, it made it that much easier to resist that glass of wine, or it made it that much easier to avoid those sweets, because I could really see that I was gaining momentum. And I think anytime we put ourselves in a position where we can start to feel those little wins, it's hugely motivating and encouraging.
You are speaking my language. I mean, like I talk about this all the time. It's not this one big thing that we do that changes. It's these small little changes that we do consistently over time. It has to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And so many times, people think I just have to go all in. I've got to be good. Have you heard that before? I have to just be good this week. I mean,
or the wagon. Right? You fall off the wagon. Like I keep telling people there's no wagon.
Exactly. It's, sometimes I'll even say in my messaging on Instagram, I'll say something about being off track. And I really don't like to use that term, but that's what people understand so much, right? Because I mean, really the whole thing is that we have to give ourselves grace. And if you want to be able to do something long-term, if you want a lifestyle, you have to believe that, it starts with your own beliefs and your affirmations of yourself. And what do you believe about yourself? And then it's just doing these small things that make a big difference. I mean, and I think the other thing is you cannot compare your journey to anybody else's journey, right? Because everybody's journey is going to look different. And, I love social media for so many things, but the one thing I don't like about social media is how you can sit there and compare yourself to so many people too. That's not a good place. I always ask somebody if they're scrolling, I'm like, do you feel better after scrolling or worse? If you feel worse, you need to get off of it. You need to stop it. So,
or you need to, I also have gotten, as I've gotten older, really, really particular about what I consume, who I follow, what are the messages that are, to me encouraging and uplifting. So I do think that, we get better as we get older at kind of curating the environment that we want. And one thing that you kind of touched on, it reminded me, whenever we're talking about wellness practices, I think it's important to remember we are a whole woman, right? We're not just our nutrition or our exercise. And so whatever we do has to be something that is manageable within the context of our life. Right. And it's one of the things I love about, right now we have kind of an expanded definition of wellness. It used to be years ago, if you talked about wellness, you were talking about diet and exercise. And now we know that it incorporates things like stress management. There is, relationship, right? Like our relationships are really important to our wellness. Finances are important to our wellness, right? Like if we want to really think about the second half of our life and creating a life that is really vital and vibrant and powerful, it means addressing all these different areas of our life. So we can't sort of chop up our life into these compartments and think that, if we're addressing one, then we are quote unquote well. I think it's important that, as you said, when you're making changes, they have to be sustainable, they have to be manageable, or else they're going to be more overwhelming and more stressful. And then we're kind of undermining our overall wellness, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think stress is such an important role of it that people don't even understand that part. And really, to be honest with you, that's probably what stuck out to me. So when after my mother passed away, I was taking care of my stepfather who had Lewy body dementia, and I was his primary caregiver. And as I was researching this, both my parents had passed away of cancer. So I kind of understood cancer, but I'd never really been around dementia. And so I joined a support group, and it was really amazing. But as I was in there, I realized it was a lot of spouses that were in there taking care of their spouses that had dementia and the stress they were under. And the more I researched this, those people's health went down faster than the person with dementia. And so that's when I thought, man, I got to get a hold of my stress, because when I first started taking care of my stepdad, looking back at my body, I can tell I had inflammation going on, and it wasn't from eating too much. It was the stress.
Yeah.
I remember describing it to people that I felt like I was out in an ocean, just treading water by myself. And that is a scary place to be when you are just trying to keep your head above the water and you feel like you're all alone, that you're the only one. And that stress will consume your body and, inflame your body and just wreak havoc. Not to mention, you're already going through it in perimenopause and postmenopause. So
which
anyway.
is why I don't think we can separate it. I mean, I think, my coaching, and I know yours too, is a blend of both health and life coaching. And I just have, seen through my own experiences and so many of the women I work with that you just can't separate the two, right? I mean, it's impossible to be really healthy physically if emotionally you're a mess. And it's hard to be really healthy emotionally if physically you're a mess. So it's really important that we understand, again, that we are a whole person, and there are all of these different aspects of wellness that we need to be attending to. It's not just, okay, if I eat a certain way, then I'm well. It's not that simple.
No. It used to be. I used to think if I got my workout in, I was healthy.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, like that was enough. And when I was in my 20s and 30s, I could out exercise a bad diet, but not when I hit 50. 50 was like, for me, that was like, oh, cannot happen anymore. You cannot out exercise a bad diet.
It's true. It's a wake-up call, right? When you hit that point in your life, it really is a wake-up call, because we realize that we can no longer compensate as easily, and we really need to make our well-being, a top priority if we want to have an extraordinary second half of life. And I can't imagine that there's a woman out there who doesn't, right?
Right. It's so true. So we haven't really touched on your reinvention of yourself, but you have reinvented yourself so many times. I know with your divorce and just so share a little bit about that, because I think that this is so important, because it comes back to this life coaching, where I find that when I'm working with my clients, that all of a sudden women seem to come to me because all of a sudden they're starting to be empty nesters, or they're starting to feel a little bit different, and they look in the mirror first, because that's what we do first, and we start judging ourselves and taking everything apart. But then it's just so much more than that, right? And so, but so many people are scared to do the next thing, whatever the next thing is, or reinvent themselves. So tell us a little bit about your reinvention.
I think there are times that women just decide, I'm going to make a career change. I'm going to move across the country. I'm going to do something. And so the change and the reinvention is something that they're driving. And then there are times, as was the case with me, where, I realized that I needed to end my marriage. And, I almost felt, even though I was the one who made the decision, I think whenever you go through a divorce, you feel in some ways like it was a change that was thrust upon you. You're doing this more than likely because you feel like you don't have a choice.
Right.
And that's of course never the case, but that's how it feels in the moment. So, it forced me to reinvent myself. And, you know, in some ways that was really terrifying. And in some ways it was after the fact. I can
Yes.
look back on
Yeah.
it and say it was an opportunity. At the time, it was really terrifying. But I think a lot of women in midlife find themselves in that place where we're looking ahead to the second half of our life and we're really questioning, what do we want that to look like? And more importantly, who do we want to be, you know, in the
Yes.
second half of our life? I mean, that was really kind of what drove me to end my marriage and to kind of reinvent myself. And I think, as I said, the most important thing for me was just taking 100% responsibility and recognizing that from that moment on, every choice I made was going to have a consequence. And if I wanted my life to look a certain way and feel a certain way, then I needed to really make the choices that were going to get me there. And I talk a lot about, you know, this idea of my future self, because I find that very motivating. And, you know, I've gotten very good at allowing my future self to guide the choices that I make today. So I'm always thinking about, you know, who is it that I want to be in 10 or 20 or 30 years? And what would she do in my situation? What, you know, how would she behave? What are the choices she would be making? And that really was what guided me. And I would say that guided me not just in terms of my wellness, it guided me in terms of the relationships that I had post-divorce. You know, I had a real clarity about what I wanted and what I needed and what my non-negotiables are. It guided me with respect to my business and, you know, the things that I have taken on, like the podcast and, you know, big decisions that I made that were very exciting. They're scary too. And I think, you know, when you're in that position of feeling a little insecure, having that future me, you know, in mind really helped me and guided me well. So that was really, you know, I whenever I'm working with anybody on anything, I think we start with what are the messages you've had about aging? How do you think about aging? You know, and so many women have these very disempowering ideas, and I don't blame them because I think it's the culture that we live in. We live in a very youth-driven, youth-obsessed culture, and we're not really, at least not until very recently, we haven't had a lot of older women who have served as role models of somebody living really powerfully and somebody who's really like rocking the second half of life. I think we had like that Golden Girls image for a long time, right?
Exactly.
And it was like women felt like, you know, they were destined to become a golden girl. And so, you know, I think that's a huge part of the work that I do, and probably the work that you and so many others do, where it's just really convincing women or helping them to see that, you know, if we take 100% responsibility, we can really create an amazing second half of life. But we have to reframe how we think about aging, and we have to have a clear picture of where we want to be and what we want to create. And with that almost like set as your GPS, it's so much easier to live into that. So that really is always, whenever I talk about reinvention, that is the biggest tool that I can share, is that idea of being guided by the future you.
I love that so much because I think that is so important, because you know, I never thought about that when I was younger. I never thought about my future me. I mean, you know, and now I think about my future me more than ever.
Yeah.
Because when like I've told you earlier, my dad died at 59. I'm 58 years old. I mean, I'm a year from when my dad passed away. He got cancer at 58, died at 59. My mother was in the hospital on her 60th birthday with cancer. And so I'm like, and there was a definite before cancer and after cancer for my mom. She lived 15 more years, which was amazing. Some of those years were great. Some of them were not so great, but I was so happy to have her 15 more years. But I think of myself like how much longer I want to live. And I have this granddaughter. And So yeah, and I love that you let that future self guide you, the decisions you make, so that you can get to that place, and that you have that mindset that it's just having your own internal guide and being able to listen to yourself. Another thing I think about too is, I think about this, like, we have good times and bad times in life. It's that ebb and flow, right? And now when I have bad times in my life, I don't get so worked up like I did when I was younger, because I know these times are going to pass.
Yeah.
Just like the good times pass. The
Yeah.
good times go and the bad times go. And that's just the way life is. And I think settling into it and knowing that is almost like a relief, and knowing that this truly can be the best time of our lives. We just have to be powerful and take back the choices and choose the way we want to live. Let that 10-year version of yourself guide you. And I love that, Karen.
And I think the reason that you probably feel that way, like it's easier to ride the waves, and many of us, at this stage of life do find that easier. I think it's because at this point we have so much evidence to show us that we can handle it. Like I think when you're younger, there's always that fear, like, well, what if I can't? And I think by the time you reach 50, 55, 60, you have enough life experience to know that, even the tough times, we can handle it. We can get through it. It may not be pleasant, but we can get through it. And I think just knowing that we have our own back and that we can rely on ourselves, again, it's empowering. It's helping us to feel a little more of a sense of control at this time that, let's face it, it can be a little tumultuous.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I could talk to you forever and ever. We won't. We'll save it for another day. There's so many things. But guys, I do want to make sure that you go listen to her podcast, because I just listened to one where you were talking about relationships. You had somebody on there, and oh my gosh, it was so good. But you've had lots of great guests, and you just have a lot of great solo podcasts too.
You.
And tell them where else they can find you. And then in the show notes, we'll put your freebie in there. What's it called?
It's the Midlife Glow Up Guide.
Yes. Okay.
7 days to your healthiest, most radiant self. So my website is wellegantwoman.com. And I have a bunch of free resources there for the ladies, but that, that is one of them, the Midlife Glow Up Guide. And my podcast is Well Egant Women Redefining Midlife. It's on Apple and Spotify and all the places. And then of course I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Well Egant Woman. I have not ventured much into TikTok. So I don't know, maybe someday. For the moment, I'm mostly on Instagram and Facebook, but I love to connect with new people. And as I said, it's been one of the most amazing parts of this journey is just getting to know people like you. So I so appreciate being here. I really love your work as well. And as I said, we're kind of kindred spirits.
Yes, we are for sure. So anyway, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being with me today.
Thank you.